Tuning lights on the airways hum. Hear the tales of where they're from. Stories whispered, not in lies. Jobs they held through changing times.
Welcome back to Amplify Your Signal, where we elevate stories, amplify voices, and support one another one episode at a time. I'm your host, Nicole Roberts, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Faiza Alam, a music educator turned two-time founder whose journey is anything but traditional. From classical guitarist to scaling and selling the same company twice, Faiza's story is a powerful example of what mission-driven leadership looks like across seasons of growth, transition, and reinvention. Faiza, let's start by having you introduce yourself. Who is Faiza Alam?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited about our discussion. So, yes, my name's Faiza. I built a nationally operating music education company from ground up called Create More Music. And as you mentioned, led it through two successful acquisitions. I served as the executive director during both of those transitions. At the core of it, I like to believe I'm someone that builds things that really matter, whether it's programs, teams, or culture. I'm very passionate about education, about people first leadership, and I'd say creating pathways for people to grow. Um, I'm currently in a season of reinvention, as I've been before in my career too. And I'm trying to bring together everything that I've learned about leadership, resilience, business, and human centered work as I kind of step into this next professional chapter of my own.
Exciting. I'm excited to talk more about that as well. So let's take it back to the beginning for a second, just to kind of set the stage, so to speak. What first drew you to classical guitar? Any standout stories from your early days as a musician?
Yeah. I started learning classical guitar at the age of 11. I started learning guitar at the age of 11. It wasn't until I got a little bit older that I was introduced to classical guitar, and I was actually persuaded by a teacher of mine to try it. He gave me a lot more complex pieces to work on, and it turned out that I was actually quite good at it. What drew me to classical guitar is a few things. It's the discipline required to learn the instrument and really any instrument at a high level. There's also a very structured and strategic approach necessary to learn an instrument. Your fingers are operating very independently, right? And so that was, I think, what drew me to the instrument initially. I did go on to get a bachelor's degree in music. And I always come back to, I think my success as an entrepreneur, my success and my pathway to leadership in a lot of ways was shaped by that groundwork that I developed through classical guitar, that resilience you learn, the discipline. You know, when you're in a music program, you're practicing hours a day. You may practice the same passage 100 times and really analyze, how can I make my fingers work differently, looking at yourself at different angles. And that, I think, formulated this kind of pathway to lead into business ownership and founding a business.
You've had such a unique entrepreneurial path, especially leading Create More Music through two successful exits. What's one moment from that journey that you feel shaped you the most?
So that's a really good question. I think, while watching students succeed and helping our independent musicians grow in their careers was definitely a huge driver for me and made a lot of impact for me. If I had to pick one moment that shaped me the most in this journey, I wouldn't even say it was any of the acquisitions. I would say it was earlier on in the journey. When I first started the company, I had originally started off as a teaching musician and a gigging performing musician. Decided, through my success that I wanted to use my MBA to create something greater. When I first started the company, my calendar was just completely booked with lessons and then operating a business. And although everything looked great on paper, we were growing, the business was growing, we were adding teachers to our roster. Behind the scenes, there was a huge risk for burnout. And in
Mhm.
that moment, really, I realized that sustainability at that point is not just an operational concern, but it became a leadership responsibility for me. I had to kind of let everything go, redesign all of our systems to support this notion, and understand that my value wasn't just personal input, it was helping to build systems that enabled scale. And that ultimately led to paving a groundwork to the exits, right? And creating a business that was very healthy and also transferable and lasting. So success at that moment became redefined as a founder and as an entrepreneur for me. It stopped being about growth at all cost and building something healthy that's going to last.
I love that. What did it take to build a business with 0 funding, and how did that shape your leadership style?
Yeah, so I will say it's very hard. It's a hard path. It takes a lot of creativity, a lot of discipline, and a lot of trust. Building a business with 0 funding requires you to be very intentional with every decision you make because there's no margin for waste. It creates a forced clarity, right? And when you don't have any capital, it becomes, I think, your responsibility to become more creative in investing in your people, your culture, and creating alignment, creating transparency, whether it's the people you're working with, the partnerships you're building, your clients, and creating an early sense of empowerment within your internal teams. And if you are, I think, able to successfully do this, alignment can also become one of your strongest currencies early on when you are founding a business with 0 capital. The other thing that I think is really important and something that I picked up really early on was that every decision that you're going to make is going to be based off of incomplete information, right? So if something doesn't work, you have to learn to adapt very quickly because again, there's no margin for waste. You always have to pivot quickly, and it really creates this sense of adaptability, right? Being agile. And at the core of it, I think without funding, I think leadership a lot of times can really get stripped down to its essentials, which is being resourceful and leading with transparency. So having had that experience very early on when I started Create More Music, I kind of tried to take that throughout the years and in every chapter of the business too.
So as your team grew and became more distributed, how did your approach to culture evolve? I mean, especially with remote and gig workers.
Initially, our company offered lessons just in the DMV area around Washington, D.C. metro area. At that time, culture was really enabled by proximity, right? And so as our team grew, we grew into various regions nationally. The team became a lot more dispersed. And so what I realized at that point is culture really does have to be designed. It's not accidental as it was initially. You really do have to build clarity and trust with a distributed team. You have to build clear expectations and also create a shared language to use across the team as well. The other thing I think that's really important when you're working with in a remote gig like setting is that feedback is so important, right? And understanding people is so important. We all operate differently, we are all motivated by different things. So, understanding each individual team member and how you can support them is very important to the success of the team as the whole. It's often, I think, the things that go unsaid that matter most to people, right?
Mhm.
And creating culture is really about creating alignment. And I use that word a lot. I use alignment a lot because I think that's really important in any organization. There needs to be alignment between the leadership. There needs to be alignment between this team members. There needs to be alignment between your clients, right? Because,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think when people understand the why behind it all, when they
Yeah.
see or feel seen as humans, at least, they can trust the leadership. And at that point, geography really becomes a far less barrier when operating a business within these type of settings.
Absolutely. Part of my work in consulting, it's actually a tagline on a lot of my materials for my business says that people want to feel valued, appreciated, supported, and seen. And if you keep that in mind in your business decisions, you can never go wrong with your people. You can't over appreciate people. You can't overvalue people. There's no I've never heard anybody that said, I just felt too seen at work, right? Like that has never been a reason for why somebody was leaving on an exit interview is because they felt overvalued or overappreciated or oversupported or overseen. It's always that some piece of that was lacking in some way. And I love how you talk about alignment and how important that is. And also the transparency and making sure that your people are not only aligned, but there's that clarity and there's that transparency. I think that leaders do such an injustice to their teams when they make the decision for them, right? They make the decision for them that, well, they don't want that information. They just want to focus on their work. They might, you don't know, right? And to give people information that helps them to understand why decisions were made. And maybe you don't need to give as much information the next time because you've built that trust. And they say, oh, you know what? I know that you were making the best decision in my best interest. And so you don't need to give me as much information as you did before, but I appreciate that you would want to, right? I also love how you have described your work as mission driven. What does mission driven scaling mean to you? And how did you navigate that during the rebrand and also the acquisitions?
Yeah, I mean, mission-driven scaling, I think, is really important for any startup, for really any organization, right? To me, what that means is that every decision that you are going to make is going to basically pass through this filter and needs to serve a purpose, right? So you have to always ask yourself, does this decision strengthen a mission? Does it dilute it? And sometimes doesn't even unintentionally change it, right? So at Create More Music, for example, our mission was to deliver exceptional music instruction and support the professional musicians that we were working with. That's really at the core what our brand stood for. In 2020, we rebranded our company completely. And this wasn't just a cosmetic rebranding. It was really about, again, creating strategic alignment, right? I'm going to use that word again.
Yes.
So, what our goal was to create a clear signal to the market that this is what we're committed to. We're committed to quality instruction. That's paramount for us and supporting our musicians. We asked ourselves, right? Does this new brand message during this rebrand really attract the instructors and the clients who share that commitment to excellence? And during the acquisition, I would say that this showed up in how we communicated change, going back to what you had kind of mentioned. It showed up in our communication strategy a lot, how we integrated teams and how we made decisions. It really filtered through um, this process of does it serve the mission? And I think by doing so, when you are going through these transitions, whether it's a rebrand, whether it's an acquisition, it gives you the ability to preserve that trust and integrity. It also protects your people and it stays true to the impact that you're trying to drive at the end of the day.
You mentioned in our conversation that you were just about to sign a lease for a brick and mortar space right before COVID hit. How did that moment shape the future of the business?
I think in that moment, we got very lucky. We avoided a huge sunk cost, right? And literally, if the shutdown had happened 3 weeks later, we would have been tied to this huge lease at that point. And our expansion strategy at that point was to basically create physical hubs for our in-home music lessons and create locations where we had strong holdings in the region. That seemed like the natural evolution of our company because we were solely based on in-home music lessons. And this would give us the opportunity to expand a lot of the programming that we wanted to offer and a lot of the programming that our faculty also wanted to offer too. But, once everything shut down, I think it really caused us to pivot in our expansion strategy. I mean, at first, it was really a lesson of business agility and risk management. We had to quickly turn everything remote and go online within, a matter of 2 or 3 days. All of our lessons were online. And through it all, like many small businesses at that time, we did suffer some losses, but we were also very, very fortunate that we had a lot of community support. But what we realized was that in some ways, this also expanded our geographical reach, right? Suddenly, our market wasn't limited to the greater DC area. We could hire and serve clients nationally. Post COVID, what we did see was in education, at least, in K through 12 education, most people did not want online lessons at that point. We were really itching to go back in person. We wanted that humanity back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we still took that idea that we have this opportunity to expand our geographic reach through our in-home music lessons. It really changed our business model. We decided to become an asset light, resilient model. And I think in a lot of ways that did also increase our acquisition attractiveness for the first exit, right? And at the core of it, I think what it really taught us was just it gave us the opportunity to learn about agility and what that means in leadership, how to really navigate these changes, and a huge lesson in risk management for sure.
Right. Yeah. You have a whole case study in it. So now, as you're stepping into this next chapter more intentionally with your family and your values in mind, what are you discovering about the kind of work and workplace that you want to be a part of now?
So I would say that I'm really discovering that, the type of work that I want is not just impressive on paper. Um,
Mhm.
it's deeply aligned with my own values as well. So an environment where there is mission clarity, there's value driven leadership, an environment where learning is very encouraged and feedback is very constructive. These are the things that I'm really looking for. I think after building and leading organizations, I also really appreciate organizations that have healthy systems that are built not only for scale, but really to support people. Because at the end of the day, an organization is really built on its people. I would also say that I'm less interested in titles and more interested in just the contribution that my skill sets are going to provide and the impact that I can make. Where that experience in scaling, leading culture, and relationship building, navigating change can really be an add value to an organization.
For other founders who might be thinking about, kind of stepping away from being the one who holds it all, what advice would you share?
I would say that if I had to give one piece of advice, it would be that as a founder, your greatest act of leadership at times can be building the capacity for you to leave. When many founders start building a business, they go into this role of master doer, right? Your value is basically your daily input. And what you need to shift is that mindset from a master doer to really a chief systems architect and strategically building a business that doesn't necessarily revolve around your input, building it for scale and preparing for that exit, building those systems and processes and putting them in that place, which will allow you to also step away if that is something that you're thinking about. SOPs, right? They're not just binders gathering dust. At the end of the day, they become your insurance policy as a founder, right? That
Yeah.
if you are thinking about stepping away, you have something in place, you have a value driver for your business. Because the truth is, buyers are buying that machine, not the founder. And they're buying a predictable, repeatable cash flow that is generated by the machine that you've also built. So having those robust systems, those SOPs, I think really prove that your machine can fully and reliably function without founders. intervention. The other piece of advice I would give to someone in that position is to start delegating outcomes and not tasks to your teams, because you need to create team autonomy, right? And so
Yes.
let your team design it, right? And celebrate the wins that they have, even if they didn't involve you necessarily, because team autonomy at that point is the business's success, but it's also your freedom to not always hold it together should you decide to leave your company.
I love how you said that. I've had leaders in the past that, I mean, this was a long time ago in my career. One of my managers said, a sign that I'm doing my job the best is that I don't have to be here and everything will still run smoothly. You all still know what you're doing. He said, I'm here to, and this is my philosophy as well. I learned this from him. He said, I'm here to remove roadblocks or to, give you support if you need it. He's like, but you know what you're doing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hired you. Right. And that's always the coaching that I give to managers as well. Is like, you hired your people for a reason. Like, let them do their best work just because they don't do it the way you would have done it. If you have the alignment, right? If you have the clarity, they know what the end result needs to be. And so you can trust them to get to the same end result. Maybe they just got there in a different way. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
And you bring up a good point, because I think founder syndrome is a real thing and we all
Yes.
suffer from it. And, it's really a pattern that you have to break for yourself. And I think most founders get there in their own way and in their own path. There's always events that I think lead up to that, and finding that resilience to kind of step back and look at the company as a company and not just, a baby that you've created in a lot of ways for founders, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and especially, I mean, to your point, you started it. You were the person that was delivering the lessons as were building the business. And then to take a step back and say, okay, well, now I have others that are doing this and it's my job. I mean, we hear it all the time, right? You need to work on the business, not in the business, in order to make sure that it is successful and that it can grow and for it to be truly healthy. And I mean, I love that you learned that lesson and had the opportunity to, have an exit not just once, but twice. I mean, that doesn't happen to many people. So I think that you certainly have a very valuable skill set for your next opportunity. I'm really excited to see what happens next with you. One thing that I am curious about is, how is the market receiving you as being somebody who is out there looking for your next opportunity, knowing that you have this founder's background, knowing that you have these exits in your background? How's the market receiving that from, being somebody who's like, hey, I'm kind of open to my next opportunity?
That's a great question. And to put it in some context, after leaving Create More Music earlier this year, this is actually the first time I found myself actually in a formal job search. So I'm really experiencing this for the first time. I've been so fortunate to be able to, build roles around myself in my career. It's been very humbling, and it's really been very enlightening. I think there are some challenges to it coming from a founder's background, and then also just being new to it too. There is this like black box that I think exists where, within organizations where resumes just go into this black box, and it's not the fault of the recruiter, but you often get ghosted, right? And I almost see that as an operational issue, right? Because instead of creating a pipeline for talent, there's a lot of candidates that might get lost in that black box. The other thing that I'm finding that's really interesting to me is that there's like this efficiency paradox, because the market is so flooded with automated tools to designed for efficiency, like applicant tracking systems, right? AI screening of resumes, things like that. And I almost think that in some ways it strips away the humanity of the process. I myself find myself having to, being rewarded by keywords in my resumes, keywords in my cover letters, rather than true strategic potential that I might see in an
Mhm.
opportunity. So I find myself often playing this tactical game of resume and cover writing instead of really focusing on actual value that I can provide. So I think that, you know, that has been a bit of a challenge as to how I think the job market has seen me, but it has definitely taught me a lot of patience, a lot of resilience and intentionality. It's really helping me understand and be more intentional about the opportunities that I am trying to seek.
Yeah, it's funny because I just listened to my friend's podcast the other day, and they were talking about how if there is a actual human, right, that's reviewing the resumes, that you don't have to do all those things. But you're so right. I mean, there are plenty of organizations out there that, I mean, whether it's volume or bandwidth or what it is, they definitely have a system or an automation that is in that initial screening stage. And you're right. I mean, if you don't have some of those keywords in there, you might not even get to be in front of a human set of eyes. And the other piece, and I've talked about this before, is there are AI platforms out there where you pay money, they will apply to 100 jobs a day for you, whatever. And I've talked on the talent side to, I can't name the name of the client, but they will open up a job posting. They will get hundreds of resumes in the first hour. And they have every confidence that it is those volume bots that are putting these resumes, they're applying for the people because they're like, how else are we getting this many resumes in just immediately as it opens? And so they'll have it open maybe an hour and they'll have to close it and try to go through that volume and then, open it back up. But to your point, I mean, it very much can feel like on the candidate side that there's just this black hole or black box or this abyss where these resumes go. And I mean, I remember when I was in-house doing this, I mean, I would spend nights, weekends, whatever, reviewing resumes. And yeah, if you're not one of those early applicants, it's a possibility that they might not even see your resume because maybe you don't have the ability on your team to spend nights, weekends, hours a day dedicated to reviewing resumes and reviewing candidates. And so it can be really hard. If you're not first, you might not even be considered. And that doesn't mean that the best person is going to get the job, right? It's going to be the earliest applicant that was also qualified, but not necessarily the best person that was in the applicant pool. And that can be so incredibly demotivating for people when you get the email later that says, hey, this job is closed. And you're like, well, I didn't even get considered and I met all the criteria, right? And so if there's any early holiday gift that I can give to our listeners is it's not you. If you are fully qualified and you don't even get an interview, it is not you. That has nothing to do with you. That is very most likely a volume or a bandwidth issue. And I'm sorry for you because I have been there myself and we'll all get through this together. So Faiza, thank you so much for being here and letting us into the heart of your story. It's clear that you lead with intentionality, community, and care. And I know that our listeners are going to take a lot away from this conversation. If someone's listening right now who could hire you or work with you or learn from you, what do you want them to know?
I would really like, everyone to know that not only am I a mission-driven, people-centric leader, but I'm also very results-driven. I have that hands-on experience, as well as that strategic experience to thrive in transitions, to help scale, to help businesses grow. I've scaled businesses, I've navigated acquisitions, and even led multiple career shifts in my own personal life. And that's really taught me a sense of resilience, clarity, and empowerment about creating lasting impact, which is something I really try to carry with me. It's leaving a positive, lasting mark wherever I go.
And if anybody has the opportunity to spend 5 minutes with you, they will definitely feel that comes through. And I think that also being people centric and being results driven are not mutually exclusive. And I think that you demonstrate that beautifully. And so I love that. Finally, where can people connect with you and learn more about you?
So certainly you can find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And we will provide all of your information in the show notes so people will be able to find you easily. Thank you so much for being with me and for sharing your story. And thank you to our listeners for listening to Amplify Your Signal. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And join us next time as we amplify voices, elevate stories, and support one another one episode at a time.
Pages blank, but hearts alive. Through their journeys they still strive. Tales of passion, grit and grace. Every journey